The Fujifilm X-H1, Fuji's new flagship camera, so they say. Is this the chosen one? The best one yet? It certainly looks like a very premium camera. Although I have to say, judging by the pictures alone before the release, I wasn't too, well, convinced about the design. It didn't look as interesting to me. Holding this is a different story. They upped the build quality. There's a new layer of paint, adding a new hardness level to the outer body. Where the X-T2 had a hardness rating of 5, the new X-H1 has a rating of 8.
And what sounds like the most unimportant feature to start with, it actually goes to show how much effort Fujifilm is always putting into the build quality of their cameras, which is much appreciated. The X-H1 now feels even more premium than the X-T2, which was already a very nicely built camera. Here side by side you can see the now bigger grip on the X-H1. The X-T2 always had a little bit of a too small of a grip to hold it comfortably for a longer time. The X-T20 has an even smaller grip. It's almost not really there, and it's not so comfortable to hold for a long time or even with bigger lenses. Now Fujifilm made the right decision to enlarge the grip on the X-H1. It's a nice choice for people who are using the camera more professionally and who would like to use some bigger lenses as well. It's so reassuring to hold now. It's comfortable, it's feeling very safe, the hand wraps around the camera very nicely, and I never had the impression I might be dropping or losing the camera at any time. I didn't even use a camera strap for the past week or so using the camera, and it always felt pretty safe in my hand. Also new on top of the camera is the secondary display, replacing the widely loved exposure compensation dial. It offers you basic information when the camera is off, and when you turn it on, the camera now shows you more detail depending on your shooting mode, which is pretty neat. The display can be illuminated for nighttime shooting, and you can also switch from black to white for the background of the LCD. In the menu you can decide which items to show on the secondary display for stills and video mode separately. That's cool. I would have loved to see a true USB-C port on the camera instead of this Type B one. Who uses that? And also a full-size HDMI port would have been a better choice for more professional use.
Also new is now a stronger lens mount. Fuji introduced a new reinforced build for that, probably foreshadowing the release of the pretty big and heavy XF 200mm f2. So this camera can hold big lenses better than others.
The X-H1 uses the same sensor as the X-T2 and other members of the X family, a 24.3 megapixel X-Trans 3 sensor, APS-C size with great dynamic range and excellent sharpness, and this X-H1 now has 2 processors. It comes with the same tilting screen as the X-T2, but Fuji changed the little button on the side and it now opens more easily. It's also now a touchscreen, and you can browse through images and videos by double tapping the screen. You just need to tap a little bit harder than I expected, but it works. Some menus are also available now via touchscreen, which I rarely used, but some may like it. The dedicated movie menu now offers you the direct selection of bitrates, and the X-H1 offers up to 200 megabit recording. The X-H1 is clearly geared more towards video production, and Fuji introduced a new color profile, the Eterna cinema profile, with soft contrasts and nicely subtle colors. Some samples coming up in this review. And you can now set the dynamic range up to 400. Long awaited, and now here, F-log recording may now happen in camera. No external recorder needed anymore.
The shutter mechanism in this camera is just stunning. It's something of a new quality for photographers that like a nice shutter sound and a buttery, smooth and silky shutter release. Fujifilm implemented an isolated shutter assembly with shock absorbers in this camera. It releases so fast, you have to be careful not to take pictures by accident. It took me the better part of the first day using the camera to get used to it, but now switching back to any other camera feels like, I don't know, switching from the comfortable Bentley into driving a tank. Performance-wise, the X-H1 now takes up to 14 images per second in electronic shutter mode, which is really impressive.
And then there's also a new stunning EVF with 3.69 million dots, about 50% more than in the X-T2. It also now protrudes a little bit further, which is useful. Many buttons and dials are in familiar positions as on previous models, but all specs aside, did I mention how nice this camera feels in the hand?
Reminds me only of a Leica maybe. I haven't had this feeling with a camera in quite a long time. And this one makes other cameras feel more like, well, more like toys really. This one feels really like a premium professional tool.
Probably the biggest new feature on the X-H1 is the in-body image stabilization. And after having a coffee to make hand-holding the camera a bit more challenging, we were easily able to record some beautiful image here, all handheld. The camera now offers up to 5.5 steps of stabilization, which is very much up there with the leading cameras in the market. It helps especially well with zoomed-in shots like this one. And if we compare it to the non-stabilized footage, you can immediately see the drastic improvement for handheld recording. So it's going to be interesting to see how this performs while walking with the camera. And to test that, we brought the X-T2 and the X-H1 and walked them side by side. And the IBIS in the X-H1 makes a huge difference as expected. Next, the GH5 against the X-H1. This will be interesting because the Panasonic has the leading IBIS system in the market right now. And it shows right here how in comparison, the X-H1 still struggles a little bit when walking. The GH5 is fantastic here. But while standing, both actually perform very much on par. And the X-H1 here is delivering a beautiful, stable image.
The in-body stabilization works pretty well as far as I can see. It's not up to par with the leading Panasonics and Olympus bodies. They do it even better, but I think this is a very good addition and it's a little bit better than the Sony cameras as far as I can tell.
In the new IBIS menu, you can choose between stabilizing when shooting only or continuously, which will drain the battery quite a bit faster. So I'm keeping it mostly to shooting only. Lenses with optical image stabilization will let you switch the IBIS on and off directly from the lens itself.
The IBIS is pretty loud in this camera, so that means that the very nice onboard microphones, also the same as the X-T2 microphones, which were already really nice, are pretty much useless right now when you use IBIS. So whenever you're not using a tripod and you use IBIS in your camera, hand holding a video shoot, you will constantly hear the humming of the IBIS in the X-H1, which negates having a good microphone on board at all. The GH5 does a much better job with this. You can barely hear it at all, and here's a little comparison.
This is the Panasonic GH5 with dual image stabilization from the Leica kit lens and the camera body. This is me, yours truly, talking into the X-H1 so you can hear the volume levels. I'm using the Eterna profile. Here is the noise from the IBIS. Now this is the X-H1 without IBIS with the kit lens. I just deactivated the IBIS on the lens. This is the X-H1 with the Rode VideoMic Pro on top, which should be much more usable. I can't say if this could be addressed in a software update, so I keep using an external microphone as I mostly do anyways. One of the hot topics for cameras these days is obviously video autofocusing, and we're pitting these three current X-series siblings against each other. First off, the X-T20, which has a pretty good autofocus. And lots of rolling shutter too. The previous flagship, the X-T2, has always performed autofocusing nicely. I took it with me to Hong Kong recently and used it for vlogging all the time, no problem. Here it focuses accurately. Now the X-H1, in which Fujifilm say they have improved the autofocus even more. Again, coming with a fan noise. It's really not keeping up that well, which is a big surprise here. A pretty unexpected result for me. Seeing all three side by side makes it very clear how the X-H1 takes much longer to find focus. On all cameras, the default autofocus settings were used, by the way. Now, just for kicks, let's mix in the GH5, which not that long ago was laughed at all the time for its bad video autofocus. But with the recent fix that's going around the internet, it actually works astonishingly well. Doing really good here. Might even be the best here in this little test. This is so unexpected. So what's really going on with the X-H1 then? It did pretty well in almost all of my test shots like this one, but then from time to time it would just completely fail locking on the focus, like here. Gets it here, but going back to the foreground, nothing happens. Moving the camera a little bit to the side where there's more contrast, suddenly it gets it, which led me to a suspicion, since I was often filming in the high dynamic range setting. This could be a culprit of the bad focusing. So I tried the focus test from before, now in dynamic range 400. And it's not locking on at all. Probably with the less contrasty color settings, the focus processing just cannot keep up. Here is another test in the wild with dynamic range 400. Actually, there is quite a bit of contrast in the image going around, but nothing really happened here. The camera just won't lock on at all. Now if I move to the side again, yes. So just changing the dynamic range to the default settings helped tremendously. It now again locks on fine, not very smoothly here, but most of the time it's working great. So when would you actually increase dynamic range? This one here is shot in dynamic range 400, and the next take will show the image with a range of 100. It's darker and there's more contrast in there, and if we compare them side by side, we'll see the sun in dynamic range 400 is nicely nuanced with more visible detail, where on the right it's just a big white blob. So nuances and more little details are preserved in the 400 setting, which is what we want. We always want more details. So I used the 100 setting as my default setting for the next test. That is the new autofocus speed setting. That lets you choose the transition speeds when focusing. This is the default setting, and you can see it locks on pretty quickly and has a very normal look to it. The fastest transition settings don't seem to produce that much of a visible difference, but sometimes it's almost jumping ahead of your movement and locks on very quickly. The slowest settings can be interesting for more cinematic focus shifts that are slow and smooth. Almost lagging behind a little bit here, but if you know what you're doing, you can achieve some beautiful results with this. My favorite setting as of now is a +1 for the AF speed, which is giving me good results in most scenarios.
So coming from those issues I figured let's test out the face recognition, the face tracking, which is a new feature on the X-H1. Here we go.
Super useful for video production, no matter if you're behind or in front of the camera. Face detection is a great tool, and as soon as you're in sufficient proximity to the camera, it will find the face accurately. As a side note, notice the focus sometimes is hunting a little bit. Take a look at the buildings in the background and see how the focus is not really locking on the very first try, but instead needs an extra attempt. But the face detection in general works quite well and reliably, and we used it often in several shots. You can activate it easily in the quick menu in your movie settings.
The camera now comes with a new 4K mode, the DCI Cinema 4K, which is nice, but what stays with the X-H1 is the pretty petty 15 minutes recording limit on the camera. You can only get rid of that by adding the battery grip, which will cost you another $300 or euros respectively.
Attaching the battery grip lets you easily switch to the boost mode, and it also duplicates some of the essential controls from the camera body, such as the useful joystick, the AF on button, exposure lock, and you will also get the extra sensitive shutter button. Adding this much volume and size to the camera obviously changes the handling completely. I like this combination, especially for portrait shoots. The grip comes with 2 extra batteries of Fuji's S-type, which are the higher capacity types. To charge them, you can always leave them inside the booster grip and charge the whole grip through the regular power connector. But this will charge only the grip. To charge the battery in the camera body as well, you can attach power through the camera's USB port. This will then charge all the batteries, and I mostly keep them all inside their compartments.
The X-H1 uses the same battery still, but at the same time it uses way more power for the IBIS and the 2 processors. So it comes down to the X-H1 having even worse battery life, unfortunately. You can circumvent this by adding the battery grip with extra cost, and also the battery grip makes the whole camera much larger. So together with the battery grip, we are entering DSLR territory here, and the benefits of having a mirrorless camera that's supposed to be smaller is kind of diminished. So you have to decide for yourself whether you are that kind of shooter that likes to have a big camera, maybe you have bigger hands, you like the better grip for portrait shooting and so forth. But for some, this may be kind of a negative. Also, with the battery grip, you'll get the headphone jack, which for a camera in this price range, that's also marketed heavily for videographers. Not including the headphone jack in a camera of this caliber in 2018 is, well, it's bad.
One thing about the batteries once more, Fuji recommends their pricier S-type batteries for use in the X-H1, but I regularly used a good handful of third-party ones like this here from Eterna. But the X-H1 displays a quick warning every time you're not using the official S-type batteries. As I learned, this has nothing to do with performance, but with better heat management in Fuji's own batteries.
The X-H1 now gives you a dedicated movie menu, meaning that whenever you change something in the video mode, it will remember where you left off, and you can pick up from there more easily than on the X-T2. I quite enjoyed this very much during my test shootings, and it makes life a lot easier because I constantly switch from photo mode to video mode, and I'm sure many people do it the same way. And hybrid shooters these days, they want to have the best of both worlds, and this is what the camera is marketed towards. What's not done so well is I kind of miss a better way with the quick settings. The way it's going now is still a little bit too cumbersome for my liking.
For example, most individual settings can easily be changed in the quick menu, like the autofocus mode or dynamic range. But there's no way to switch into a complete preset from within the movie quick menu, which can be pretty annoying at times. As a hybrid shooter, switching from photo to video constantly, here is where this leads up to. You need to dial in the video mode, set the ISO, set the shutter speed, I usually use the T setting, double check your shutter speed, and lastly, double check if the resolution and everything else is correct. Now that's about 5 steps every time. Let me show you how to switch presets on the GH5. You change your preset, done. That's it. I mean, that's the very fundamental idea about a custom preset, isn't it? Come on, Fuji, I know you can update this. Give some love to the quick menu logic.
The hype about the X-H1 was pretty big, and Fujifilm did their part with good marketing, but out of nowhere came the announcement of the forthcoming Sony A7 III, which is a specs monster of a camera. So where does this leave you as a potential Fuji user, or are you maybe even using a Fuji camera already? Make sure that you know what you're doing with your camera, because not everybody is the same, and some people need on-point eye autofocus, where Sony is class leading and they are #1 and they are doing a spectacular job with eye autofocus. The Fuji eye autofocus isn't bad, but they are miles apart. But I would like to talk more about the system in itself, because when it comes down to lens selection, for example, lenses are something that you buy pretty much forever. You rarely sell your lenses as often as you sell a camera in general. And the Fuji lens lineup is spectacular. Regarding most bang for your buck, I think the Fuji lenses can't be beat. They are small, they are lightweight mostly, and you get superb image quality for not that much money. And if you compare that with Sony lenses, well, you pay sometimes double or 3 times the price for equivalent quality. Plus, they will be much bigger, so you have to think twice if it's just the specs alone or if it's more than that. And for me, the build quality, the lens selection, and everything combined, the menu system, the ergonomics, makes me believe that the X-H1 is a good contender in the field. Speaking of the lens selection, Fujifilm has the beautiful kit lens, the 18-55, for example. And even Billy, the Fuji guy, in an interview recently, he said that Fujifilm are almost afraid of marketing this lens too well because they fear they might sell fewer of their prime lenses even, like the 23 or the 35mm, because this lens is just so good. It's probably the best kit lens in any system, if you ask me. And this is a huge plus for the Fuji system. You go out with a kit lens, you buy your first camera or your second, and you buy the kit lens with it, and you go out there and you have great image quality in photo and in video. I cannot stress this enough. This is really important. And you don't have to spend thousands to buy nice lenses when you're really nitpicking. Even the Sony a7 III is not the king of them all, because specs-wise, the GH5 even trumps the a7 III in terms of 10-bit 422 video recording. So you have to really make up your mind where to go with your camera. Are you a casual shooter? Do you do portraits? Do you do video mostly? Cameras are getting better by the day, and it's really incredible to see all those great cameras come out, and it makes the selection much harder. But what's best is always to go out there, maybe rent a camera, try it out for a day, get the handling, get the ergonomics, you know, play around with it, and the camera that makes you want to go out and shoot is the camera for you. The new Eterna film simulation looks very promising, but where exactly is its place in Fuji's color hierarchy? If we arrange all the profiles by their saturation and tonality, Velvia is the most colorful and most contrasty option. Provia, the standard profile, sits right in the sweet middle, followed by Astia with just a little bit less contrast to it. Classic Chrome, being a favorite profile of many users, offers greatly reduced saturation, and that's why many people like it so much. Those subdued and subtle colors has a special look about it for sure. Well suited for portraits are the Pro Negative profiles, where Pro Negative High delivers slightly more contrast to the image. Now Eterna places itself right in the bottom left of the graph. It's even less saturated than Classic Chrome and is way less contrasty, which is what makes it so interesting for that certain cinematic look. Recording F-log footage from the camera, it's mostly without any saturation or contrast, which is left out and will be added back later in color grading. Eterna out of the box shows very pleasing and soft color rendering, which is good news to everyone trying to achieve a nice to look at filmic look without spending too much time in post-processing. This scene just needs a little touch of warmer colors to match the friendly cafe atmosphere, and we're good to go. We learned about some obvious downsides of the new X-H1, some things that desperately need a software update. But in the end, after shooting with the camera for about 2 weeks, it totally grew on me. The ergonomics are generally really good, the IBIS is a super welcome addition, and I guess I'm already in love with the Eterna film simulation. So, should you buy this camera? Well, make no mistake, you get the same image quality as in the X-T2 or even as in the X-T20 or the X-E3. It's the same sensor. But what you get over those cameras is better grip on the new body. You get the secondary display on top, you get a nicer menu system because hybrid shooters will find this very useful for photo and video. And what you get is, of course, the in-body image stabilization, which may be huge depending on your use case for the camera. So I would suggest take a close look at this X-H1, maybe rent it for a day and see how it feels. I think it handles great, and I gotta say, I kind of like this camera.
Natürlich. Dankeschön.